Today, the budget crawler gets a budget steering upgrade. Now, when it comes to upgrading the steering system on your Jeep, there are tons of options out there. There's a lot of aftermarket companies that make stuff. But what we're going to do today is probably the most budget-friendly upgrade you can do to get a somewhat beefy steering system on your Jeep. Now, this definitely applies to Jeep TJs and Jeep XJs, but I'm not sure. Maybe it applies to YJs too. I'm not sure. You'll have to do some research, but definitely TJs and XJs. So what exactly are we going to do? Well, we're going to be replacing the tie rod. So this is a factory steering setup. This is a Y-link steering setup, as they call it. So we've got usually the steering box with the pitman arm is up here, and then we've got the drag link that comes down to the steering knuckle on the passenger side. And then we've got the tie rod that goes between the drag link and the other steering knuckle. However, if you look at a factory TJ, you'll see that we've just got this thin little hollow tube that runs between the drag link and the knuckle over there. And the problem with this is, as soon as you hit a rock, a stump, a log, anything off-road, this thing's going to bend like a pretzel, and good luck getting off the trail and getting home. So what's the solution here? Well, the solution is to get yourself a Jeep ZJ Grand Cherokee tie rod. Now, these are solid steel. They're not a hollow tube like the factory TJ ones, and they will bolt right onto the TJ factory drag link. So we can leave everything from the steering box down to the passenger side steering knuckle, and then just bolt this little setup on the bottom here. So the components you'll need are a ZJ tie rod, a ZJ tie rod end, and an adjusting sleeve. And that is it. So my installation on this Jeep is going to be a little bit different than just the simple installation of this tie rod, because if you saw the video when I installed this front axle, you'll know that I installed this TerraFlex high steer kit. Now, I tried to make this work because it was already on the axle when I got it. So I figured I might as well give it a try, and it's not working out as well as I had liked because the steering geometry just isn't there. So, you know, the theory behind it is we want a perfectly parallel track bar and drag link, and as you can see here, they are not. I attempted to make them parallel by putting an Astro van, a Chevy Astro van pitman arm on the steering box. That helped a little bit, but I'm still getting some bump steer on the road, and I'm just going to go back to the factory steering style, which is the Y-link, where, you know, it comes from the pitman arm down, and then we've got basically Y's off into the tie rod. So in order to do that, I have to switch back to the factory pitman arm, and I've got to swap back to a factory style steering knuckle over here. I'm going to start on the passenger side here. This knuckle will be staying. This is a factory style knuckle. It's just the other side that we'll be replacing. So on this end, we just need to take the tie rod end off. I found the best way to remove these things is just to use a pair of wire cutters. Slowly work it out. Then we just want to leave this threaded on, at least a few threads here, so that when we break the tie rod end loose, it doesn't fall on the ground. And there's a few ways to pop this off. We could use a pickle fork, try to drive that in there. We could even use like a press, like a puller press kind of tool that maybe slides over here and pushes that down. But I found the best way is just to take a hammer like this, give it a few taps right on here. That kind of shocks the steel enough that it lets go, because this is a tapered fitting. We'll drop right out, the nut will catch it, and then we can pull it the rest of the way out. Now on to the other side. We've got all the parts swapped out in order to put the factory steering back in. So I got a factory style knuckle on there. We've got that all reassembled with the caliper bolted back on. And then over on the steering box, we've got a factory style pitman arm on, which is actually the original one off of this Jeep I just put back on there. So now we're ready to bolt that assembly in with the drag link and the tie rod. put the tie rod end into the steering knuckle, tried to tighten the nut, but the threaded portion of the tie rod end was just spinning. So in order to keep it from spinning, I threw this bottle jack under there with a piece of wood. Basically just forced, it's a tapered fit, so I just forced the taper up into the knuckle, and that was enough to create enough friction so that the nut could tighten up there. So it would have been super difficult without that. So we got everything torqued down, got all the cotter pins in place for the castle nuts, and I just gave this thing an alignment. So I will give you a quick overview of what I do for alignments. They're super simple. The only thing you adjust on a TJ with factory control arms is the toe. So how much the front tires, the front of them, how close they are together, how far apart they are, basically. You can adjust caster on some of the earlier TJs. They have cam bolts at the bottom of the lower control arms. However, I don't recommend messing with those because usually they're rusted in place, at least where I live, and it's going to be more trouble than it's worth. If you need to adjust the caster, buy adjustable control arms and lengthen them or shorten them depending on your needs. So the method that I use, I think a lot of people use this, is basically we take a straight edge and we clamp it to the brake rotor. So first we make sure the brake rotor is bolted down all the way. I've got two of these lug nuts cinched down all the way so the rotor's right flat up against the hub. And then we take a straight edge. I'm just using two 4-foot levels. You could just as easily use a section of 1-inch square tubing. So I've got one clamped to this side and I've got one clamped to the other side. And then on each of them I have the same mark. So I've got a mark here, which would represent the front of the tire. Got a mark in the center to line up with the hub. And I've got a mark back here to represent the back of the tire. And this is much easier to do with two people, but I'm just working with one right now. So you can see I've got the tape measure on the straight edge on the other side. Over here, if we read it right where the mark is, comes out to 56 and 5/8 it looks like. Now we come around to the back. And we take the same measurement, and we are at 57 and just under a quarter there. So right now that means we have too much toe in, so the front tires are going to be too close together. The rule of thumb that I generally go by, and this is just from research on the internet, is that you generally want an 1/8 inch to a 1/16 of an inch of toe in the front. So we want our measurement in the front to be 1/16 to 1/8 of an inch less than our measurement in the back. So knowing that we want the front of our tires to be further apart, I'm just going to loosen up this adjustment sleeve right here at the tie rod end on the tie rod. And I'm going to spin this so that the tie rod end and the tie rod get further apart. And this will just be an iterative process, so I'll stretch it out a little bit, then I'll come back, measure again, and keep making adjustments as needed. And then once our toe is all set, we need to go ahead and make sure that the steering wheel is straight. And that's going to be this adjustment right here. The way I usually handle this adjustment is I'll get my toe all set, so we have the proper amount of toe in the front. Then I'll take the Jeep for a short ride, maybe half a mile or so, and just get a feel for where the steering wheel kind of wants to be as we're driving down the road in a straight line. And then I'll come back to the driveway. I'll take as long of a straight shot in the driveway as I can and try to get the steering wheel located where the vehicle is steering straight, which in essence means that our front tires are pointed as perfectly straight as they can be. And then I'll adjust this sleeve so that the steering wheel turns to the right position. So when you adjust this, typically the steering wheel will turn and the tires will stay put, especially if you're on asphalt. And once that's all set, we're totally done. And that wraps things up for today. Now, like I said, this is a pretty good upgrade for any TJ or XJ, and if you even take your TJ or XJ remotely off pavement, I would recommend that you do this upgrade, and it's very reasonably priced. So the parts I got were off of a 97 Grand Cherokee with a 5.2 liter V8 engine. You can go on Rock Auto and buy these things, and these are the prices you'll find right there as of today. And it will cost you $87.08 plus a little bit of shipping, maybe, I don't know, 10, 15 bucks. for shipping in order to do this upgrade, and it is very worthwhile. Now obviously my installation was a little bit different because I already had the parts, but as for the total for the day, I'm going to assume that I had basically bought brand new parts here and include that in the total build cost for this Jeep. So that brings us to a little bit over $7,000, and of course we still have more work to go, so stay tuned for that. Thanks for watching.